Welcome to Amazon Legends, where we have real stories about making it big on Amazon. Our guests are CEOs of large companies and entrepreneurs who became power sellers, also providers specializing in helping sellers, aggregators that acquire sellers, and former Amazonians will give us an insight from behind the scenes. Here is your host, Nick Uresin.
Welcome to another episode of Amazon Legends. My next guest today was a Google Ads professional, and he fell into the Amazon space accidentally. Today, he is the founder of Amazon AMZ Pathfinder, which is an Amazon growth agency. And when he's not working, he likes cycling, rock climbing, and he's working on his French, because I understand he recently moved to France. So with that, everybody, meet my guest, Brent Zahradnik. Welcome to the show, Brent.
Hello, Nick. Thank you for having me. Much appreciated.
It's a pleasure. So I have to ask you what took you to France, but that's going to be later. So, and I'm always interested because I moved around myself and the motivation for people. And I think I have an idea why, but we'll talk about that later. So tell me something at AMZ Pathfinder, something you're doing very well right now.
Yeah, sure. I think increasing conversions is a good summary.
So conversions always happens to be my favorite subject. So tell me how you do that.
Well, we think of it like controlling customer journey, if you will, through the Amazon marketplace.
So when the shoppers come to Amazon and they do their search, as far as controlling the journey, just give us a little description of what that controlling customer journey looks like.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So think about someone going to the Amazon marketplace, whether it's US or Canada, UK, let's stick to English language marketplaces for the moment. You want them to see your product if they're the right customer, but if they're not the right customer, you also don't want them to see your product, right? Because you want to maintain a very nice conversion rate on the listing. You want to maintain a nice click-through rate. These are all metrics that Amazon is constantly monitoring and looking at. So when we talk about controlling a customer journey, it's exclusion in addition to trying to appeal to the right people. It's like two sides of that same coin. And then we're also trying to control, what kind of experience they have when they land on the product detail page or listing, as it were. Okay. So I think those are maybe the two sides of that coin, and the various steps there within we can of course get into.
Well, yes. So this summarizes pretty well. So people always talk about, okay, we want more traffic, but they also need to equally consider what traffic they don't want, because that's going to drive a lot of traffic to the product detail page. And the next thing is it's the wrong people. So they have no interest in purchasing. So, okay, great. So this is a great conversation. So let's now set the stage. So we're going to talk about driving the right kind of shopper to your listing by controlling the search, or I should say by controlling when you show up in the search results. What kind of appearance in those search results is the right kind of appearance, right? That's the first part. Mm-hmm. And then how we do that. And then we're going to move on to making sure that more of those people, more of those right kind of shoppers that land on your product page, how we can increase the rate of purchase on the product detail page. So that's what we're going to talk about. It's a great conversation. Ultimately, there are several other pieces of the puzzle to be successful on Amazon, but these two are, I'd say, they are the main drivers. So let's start with the appearance in search results. So tell us, what's the first thing you need to do in order to bring the right kind of person to see your search results?
Yeah, I think maybe one piece that's absent from a lot of conversations that occur around this subject is what we would call like a customer persona or customer avatar. So, or shopper avatar. So when we talk to a lot of our clients that we do work with, we're very interested in who is buying their products, because we really want to understand who the person is that we're trying to appeal to. And that requires us to take a step back from, I think, what most people would consider and jump into. Like maybe you expected me to talk right away about like image optimization or titles or something like that. But actually, we're quite interested in what the customer avatar is, who these people are, what their pain points are, why they would be interested in this product or line of products or catalog that this company we're working with offers, right? So we want to actually understand that first. And so we'd like to have a conversation with brands and understand what they understand about their existing shoppers and customers, because we see it as kind of our job to like rely on their knowledge. So why would we go out and start optimizing and like doing work? Sometimes it feels really good to like go and do work and do a lot of things. But if all that heat and energy and time is not really spent in the right direction, well, that wasn't really worth much of anything, was it? So we first want to understand the customer avatar and persona so we can start to build an idea of what the listing should look like in order to appeal to those people. Because I think the first question is like, why bother optimizing? Because you're trying to get towards these outcomes, but we have to understand who the person is first.
Yeah. So this is a good subject because it's come up. We had an episode with a lady who specializes in this, and you are right about people jumping straight into content, title, image, and all that stuff. But who is it that we're trying to appeal to? So walk us through how to build a customer avatar.
Yeah, sure. Okay, I'll try my best with this. I think probably the first way to approach what a customer avatar would look like. So like I mentioned, we talk to our clients, we talk to them about who they think buys it, and then they tell us about interactions they have with the shopper. We can also get this information from the Q&A on the actual landing page of the product and see what kind of questions and concerns they have. And then we can imagine, all right, of the people that are buying this, there's also data inside Amazon, by the way. We can get demographic information to a certain extent. So, gender, age, household status, income. We can start to build several portfolios. We usually come up with names that are like alliterations. Like what's a good so if someone's really cost aware, right? They're very cost aware of like a price. They're price aware. You could say like cost aware Karen, or like price conscious Paul. It's like someone who's very focused on the price. So like, okay, I'm buying this because it's cheaper than the other ones, or it's about the same market rate. Or somebody who is really interested in quality. They're like, oh, this is a super high quality stainless steel kitchen thing, and that's really important to this customer persona. So when we're talking about that with the imagery, with potentially videos, with the copy, we're going to be talking about quality, and price is maybe not as important for this person. So understand that those two people, someone who's maybe not as price sensitive and someone who's very price sensitive, will respond differently to different keywords. They'll click on different ads. They'll look at filters differently. Just talking about going right into the discussion of like images and titles is assuming that everyone shopping on Amazon is like this like gray mass of like faceless people that are all the same, when in reality there's millions of different people, and of course people are people, they're all extremely different. So we try to build these personas like that, and then we think, who are we writing this for? Who are these images for? What person is going to be enjoying this? Is it price conscious Paul? Okay, cool. Let's talk about that more. Let's highlight that more. Or is it the person who's like really into quality? I can't think of a good name that starts with a Q off the top of my head. Sorry, but basically, that's how somehow we start. So it comes down to interviews with the brand and the seller. It comes down to Q&A. It comes down to demographic information, and it comes down to just brainstorming. Because really, we believe that optimization is like art and science, and this is the art part of it, right? Is understanding and empathizing with people. And then the science part is like the robots part. That's like the keywords and structured data and flat files. And I know you've had some guests on recently, because I listened to a few episodes that talk about these things. So maybe that's not something we need to tread on too much. So that's how we start. That's how we start in on that. We just create some of these profiles.
Yeah, I mean, this is the essence of it. It's actually, there is an old rhetorical question, so to speak. is marketing art or science? So the right answer before the internet age was, of course, it's art. But now it's both, right? So it's become both. So because your doesn't matter how much of an effort you make into figuring out who the customer is, unless you back it up with data and then validate. And by the way, that's also moving target. So your approach may be the right approach today, that may be backed up by data, but suddenly the trends shift, and then you need to be on top of it all the time. So I mean, this is the way you put it is exactly the way. So you need to understand it, but then go check the data. So a few things you said, I like actionable stuff. So a few things you said that I would say actionable. Of course, you interview the client, or as the brand owner yourself, you ask yourself as
right, because who knows more about the brand than you? Or if you're working in a client relationship, your client that is the brand owner, like they're going to know the most. They have the history, they have the context. Why did they make it? Who do they think it appeals to? That'll shortcut the whole process, drastically.
Yeah. But what I liked about something you said, as you know, the brand owner is too close to the subject matter. So they may also think who is buying the product is the right thing, but that's not the case. So on the Q&A pages, on the product detail page, in the Q&A section, looking at that information, I find that so valuable. I mean, I heard one more guest talk about utilizing the Q&A section, and you just presented another way to utilize it. So
yeah, and not only your own Q&A also, but those of your competitors who have products that are very similar to yours. Is the overlap, like let's put myself in the shoes of a consumer, a customer. Am I looking at this stainless steel kitchen thing? Well, why would I also look at the one from this other brand that's $5 more or $5 less and is like kind of the same thing? Well, what's the Q&A on that page too? That Q&A has a goldmine of information. And there's tools that can, we don't have to get into specifics. I can like pull this information and, massage that for you and come up with trends and grouping of keywords. And I'm sure there's some Chat GPT plugin that does that now too. So, there's easy ways to get that. You don't have to spend hours just looking at the Q&A, scrolling through each question, but yeah, that's huge.
Yeah. I mean, so look at that, and then that will tell you. And the other thing is about the demographics. What are some key demographics that you look at when you are trying to figure out who's the right audience for you?
Yeah, and I'll be totally honest. I wish Amazon gave us more information on this than they do currently. And I can't even remember the name of the exact dashboard, but in the ad console, there's even a place you can find this. So it's like brand metrics for demographics, essentially. And it's pretty much what I mentioned. So it's like age range, gender, household income, education level. There's maybe one or two other things in there, but that just gives you like a rough outline. I wish that you could break it down, let's say by product, or even like, I don't know. I mean, you can do time of year, I suppose, to a limited extent, but the brand owner or the person we work with, they might also have data on this based on their email list or surveys they've taken in the past too. That can be very interesting. If you take a sample size of a couple thousand customers and gotten some information, we found out that 65% are women or are female. It's like, okay, that tells us something right there. And of them, what is their kind of like stage of life? Are they younger? Are they older? Like, are they midlife? Like, do they have kids? What's the house look like? Those are the other demographic data points we can get. But I'll be honest with you, Nick, the ones from Amazon they leave a little bit to be desired still, unless there's some other data source out there I don't know of that maybe someone in the audience can scream.
So, when I work with my clients, we have an exercise that we go through before we start any listing work or any research work or anything like that. That part is the positioning part. So the positioning part has several components. First, we discuss what the product is. What is the tagline? How would you describe it? What is it? They go into all these meaningless descriptions. It's the revolutionary, blah, blah, next generation. So doesn't mean
But
anything.
what you're looking for is like 2 sentences, though, is what I'm hearing.
Yeah,
right?
Exactly. Just
Okay.
one line, because I'm looking to see what keywords will come up. But more important, I ask them, who is your primary audience and who is your secondary audience? So, and they start going into this, women between the ages of 25, 50. I said, no, that's not your primary audience, because that people don't go on Amazon and say, okay, I'm a woman, I'm 32, and I'm looking, that's not the case. It's keyword. So the definition of audience is totally different than the demographic. So my question, at the same time, those demographics are so valuable. So how do you utilize that demographic info with the gender and the income and things like that in your content work?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's an interesting idea, because so we did this like art part, right? This is the art part, I think, the demographics and all this, and then we layer that on top with the science part. So, we use a variety of tools. Data Dive is probably our newest, like most liked one, but we've used Helium 10 for many years. We use Song Guru, and we take the data from those tools and try to layer that on top of our understanding of what the demographics are and who the customer buyer personas are. And it requires us to try to put ourselves in their shoes and we just run the searches ourselves too. We go and, do it incognito mode with VPN and try to mimic where we are, coming from to like simulate that as best we can. And one thing I think is often forgotten, by the way, and we can highlight this, is like that mobile, because we're all sitting, I'm at my desktop computer here with big screens, right? But the reality is, 50% or more of people are shopping on mobile. So their lived experience of using a mobile app or even just the browser with Amazon.com or .co.uk is very different from desktop. So you have to try both of those things. Yeah, so to get back to your question, if I can circle back around, because I always get off on the mobile tangent. I think it's so overlooked in the space. Yeah. We create, groupings of keywords that we would consider like root keywords, and then stems that go off of that. And then those fall into groups. And then those groups are prioritized by like estimated volume, between the tools that we use and between some Amazon data sources, like which ones are high volume, which ones are high relevance and high volume, because the intersection of those two things is very important. And then what we think these personas are using in order to search. So we kind of group it like that.
So you take the demographic data and then you couple it with data about keywords.
Yeah.
And so you mentioned Data Dive, Helium 10. So can you get a little bit more specific and how this is not a tutorial, but there is a big difference between, okay, we use Data Dive and then demographics, and then this is how we use it. That makes it a little bit easier for our listeners to go about, trying some of those tactics.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, well, I mean, Data Dive as a tool, we found to be a very complete, and this is not an advertisement for Data Dive, although I'm a big believer in the tool. We've only recently started using it. But because we can have a list of 10 competitors, for instance, like ones that, if we go back to the earlier question about what is this persona looking at, what does the data tell us is some of the biggest sellers in the same, you could say, leaf node that our current product we're doing optimization for is in. And then we just load those into Data Dive and take a deep look at where they are ranking and we're not ranking. And then we try to figure out, okay, of the personas that are attached to this, like, would they be interested in this keyword? Does this look like something that we should prioritize and try to aim for? And if so, how do we work it into the title? How do we work it into the content or the back end, of course, which is like the last bastion there, the back end keywords. So it's really comparing ourselves to the landscape, because nothing on Amazon exists in a vacuum, right? Everything exists in comparison to all the other many options that are out there. I know Amazon calls it the infinite shelf, right? Sometimes I don't think it's necessarily so infinite, because of course, page 1 and page 2 only have so many slots on them. But when it comes to trying to winnow down what the essentials are in terms of like what things we think we should rank for, that's how we use it. And that's true for like the different components of it. And to be clear, I myself am not the Data Dive expert. credit to Elena and my team who does all the listing optimization because they know all the details. I have the overview. I've seen them work, but that's my understanding of what they're doing step by step when they pull stuff out of there.
So the approach is a twofold. You get your demographics and then you plug that into a tool like Data Dive or others to figure out what are the associated search terms with those demographics.
Well, I'll be clear. Data Dive itself doesn't have a facility for like demographic search, and I don't believe they have a data that comes out of it, but we use our understanding of the personas that we've built and try to layer that in with the keywords. So some of this is guesswork. It's not like I said, it's an art and a science. It's not super exact, but it gives us, it's much easier for us to visualize how people are shopping and who those people might be if we give them names, if we give them attributes, if we understand what their needs and desires are, because then actually writing a listing or coming up with photos that address what they care about is much easier. And maybe just as importantly, it speaks to them like in their language, which is another interesting thing to think about. Someone who reads something that is written in such a way that resonates with them is much more likely to be convinced by it, trust it, or buy it, right? Because it's in their language, they recognize it. Whereas people who we don't necessarily want on the listing, or we don't necessarily want them to come and like try to convert, because yet again, we're trying to keep that conversion rate high, click-through rate high, it will maybe turn those people off. So they will be less interested in the listing and they will self-select and go a different direction. So it's we're trying to play like a little bit of traffic cop, right? Like green means go, you come this way. Red means, no, or yellow, go this way. We don't want you on the listing because you're not who we think is the demographic. Of course, Amazon's smart enough, and I think this is pretty widely understood. Like if a bunch of people are searching for something and they end up at our listing anyway, even if we don't have that keyword in there, over time, it will kind of create its own path of convenience, I guess it's called, right? Because people are walking through the forest to get there on their own, even though we didn't direct them that way. And Amazon will eventually say, oh, okay, you know what? There's a symbolic link between these two. This is relevant. But with our job doing keyword research, looking at competitors, looking at the Q&A, looking at their photos and sometimes their videos, we're trying to cover all those bases. We're trying to make sure that we've done what is, at that point in time, what we feel an accurate snapshot of the ecosystem is. Of course, like you said, this needs to be reviewed in 6 months anyway. So it's never like we do it and we're done and we just walk away forever. It's probably better to, have it on a schedule. But because the Amazon marketplace, of course, is also, evolving very fast and rapidly shifting. Trends change, way that people searches change, brands change. But what we're trying to do is get an accurate snapshot at that time. So, who's the persona? How do they search?
So I have a question for you in terms of a common challenge. So as you know, there is whatever product idea you have and whatever product you end up creating, there's always competition out there for it. And it's not a bad thing. It's a good thing, because if there is no competition, then you question, is there a market for this? So you always have competition, and the competition ends up in a price comparison situation. So how do you deal with scenarios where you have a particular product that is a premium product? It's a far better product than another listing that is really the mass market version of, but they both come up in the same search. And these people who are mass market people are very good at, doing their homework to get ranked for those keywords. So suddenly you are appearing right next to this guy who is $10 cheaper than you. They're selling for $10 something and you're selling for $29.95. And it's essentially the same kind of product. How do you differentiate yourself and position it so that you actually get business out of this rather than get killed?
Yeah, that's a really, really, really hard thing to solve. I think if I had a 2-sentence answer, that I would be consulting all the biggest brands in the world that have those quality products and don't know how to deal with the let's call them mimicry, the mimicry that occurs on Amazon, right? Because it is a very mimetic environment. Someone comes up with something, of course, within a couple months, whatever that is, if it's new and it has traction, it's going to be noticed by someone and they're going to try to copy it. And my default answer would probably be to understand how to talk to the people that actually care more about price than they do about they care more about quality than they do about price, which is that kind of dichotomy I mentioned earlier. I'm someone who I'll gladly pay $15, $20 more for something if I know that when I buy it, I'll have it for 3 years instead of 1 year before it breaks. It's much more appealing for me to have something longer term. So the language that I would look for and the kind of brand perception that they're putting on the listing is going to speak to me and resonate with my values as a shopper persona or customer. And something that is cheap, I might be suspicious of, even if they're trying to appear as though they are premium. There's got to be some corners cut somewhere if the price is that different. Might be my mindset or a lot of people's mindset when they see it. The only problem with that, if I had a steel man the other side of this, Nick, is that what Amazon rewards is like sales volume and velocity, right? So if you're selling a $29 product versus a $12 or $10, the one that's 12 or 10 is probably going to have more units per day, and therefore is probably going to be rewarded better in Amazon's algorithm. Because as Jeff Bezos says, your margin is my opportunity. And the margin that the larger priced, bigger priced product has is the opportunity for the smaller priced product to move fast. So I just simultaneously put out and then defeated my own point for your question. Because I can see it from both ways. I really can. And I would say, premium brand positioning and making sure to attract the right people while repelling the wrong, air quotes, people would be your best bet. But doing that is something that's far easier is said than done, because it's a lot more nuanced when it comes down to it, isn't it?
Yeah. Well, I have an approach for this, and then very quickly I will also defeat my own approach.
Okay, I can't wait to hear.
So my approach is really what is the differentiator, and ultimately it's the value proposition. So there's two aspects of comparison, right? There's the price comparison and there's the value comparison. So those that are cheaper than you, that is price comparison. The idea would be to convert that into value comparison. So what is the value? It kind of connects with some of the things you said about what if it lasts 3 years versus 1 year. That's one thing. Like, for example,
value.
The best example I can give you is the Amazon batteries. I don't know if you buy batteries on Amazon. So if I ever buy Amazon batteries, I know they last like 1/3 of the life that a Duracell battery has.
I've had this experience with generic batteries at stores here in France. Yeah, they're terrible because you're like, oh, what a deal. There's 4, and then you realize, oh yeah, those 4 equal those 2 that I bought for this other price, and they don't last nearly as long.
Yeah, exactly. So I encourage my clients who are in that position to focus on the value and then build that value into your product in a way that will resonate with the audience. So that way, somebody who says, okay, this one is $14.95, this one is $29.95, but I get this, I get that, I get the other, and therefore this is more important for me. So this is the way to combat in my approach. So now, would you like to hear what I have to defeat my own?
Absolutely want to hear.
So I've heard this recently, like a couple of days ago, that the research shows that under inflationary circumstances, consumers get into analyzing the value of the individual components of something they are buying, and then check that against what would be the cost if they bought them separately. And therefore, if some of those components are not of much interest to them, they'd rather go buy the single ones. So that's the thing that defeats this philosophy. However, there is one, if you like, piece of light at the end of the tunnel on this, that this happens under the inflationary circumstances. So if the inflation situation resolves itself and the discretionary spending goes up a little bit and people are feeling better, then obviously people ultimately gravitate towards value. So that's my only hope in that. But my bottom line is don't get into price comparison, get into value comparison, and then beef up your value. So that way, you will have a much, much better chance of getting the people that would be interested in your product.
Right. And if I could use a quote from Seth Godin, who is one of the best authors and marketers around, of course, but I remember him saying once in a podcast, the worst thing about a race to the bottom is that you might win.
It's true.
Which is brilliant because it's true. Imagine if you do get the crown for cheapest whatever. Well, what's going to happen to your margin? What's going to happen to your ability to pay for customer support? How about your ability to have, new product development? The reason that products in retail stores have margins that are so much higher than a lot of Amazon FBA businesses, and this is a fact. I mean, the markup on retail is usually far greater, is because they're paying for so many other things that you don't necessarily need to pay for with Amazon. Like it was possible, I should say, 2015, 16 to have a product, put it up on Amazon, do some black hat stuff and get to the top. And it could just be you and a VA or something. But this is part of another thing maybe we'll talk about later in the podcast, but like what are opportunities that still exist on Amazon in 2023, in the modern era? We're not talking about 5 years anymore. Things have changed really fast in 5 years. So, what is the piece that still exists there? What is the opportunity? And I have a small theory about that, but.
Okay. Well, we'll definitely, I want to hear about that. So, okay. So let's kind of wrap up the search. So, I mean, obviously there are other bits and pieces, but what I'm hearing from you in essence is make sure that you know exactly who you are targeting by using a customer avatar, and then make sure that you have the data to back that theory. And then based on that, pick your keywords accordingly. And talk about excluding. So how do you go about excluding the ones that are not for you?
Oh, that's a really good question. I'm not sure if I have the best answer to that. I'm afraid that some people on my optimization team probably have the better way to frame it, but we do put some keywords like in the never or exclude list, just like we do for advertising. Like, well, we know that people are looking for it for this use case, but that use case might be confused with this other use case, or maybe someone just doesn't understand properly what it is. And so being explicit as possible about what it is, and then making sure that these terms that are in the never or not category don't show up on the listing or couldn't be misconstrued as that, would be one of the top ways we would do that. So, how we would do it with advertising is like, these are set as like negative keywords, right? So we never want to show up for this. And of course, those terms also get turned into, advertising negatives, because, we don't ever want to be misconstrued for this or misunderstood as this. We don't want to get clicks for that. Those customers, they will show up on our page. They will spend our money by clicking on our ad, but ultimately they're not going to be the ones that will convert, and they'll bounce, and that's going to harm us. So those two lists, like the never or do not list, whatever we're calling it, would be something that finds its way into our process. And so, we're making optimizations to these listings based on hypotheses that we've gathered from, the demographic data and the keyword data. And then we're making some guesses too about what we think would be a no. And then we're going to monitor those listings for impact and do, tests as best we can with Amazon, because Amazon does have limited A/B testing functionality, and then adjust as required. I do believe that, launching, gathering data, and iterating is better than trying to make everything perfect from the very get-go and then just saying like, okay, now we don't need to ever touch it again. I'm a big believer in like, speed of execution and iterative loops of feedback, I suppose.
Yeah. I mean, nothing is static in Amazon environment. You have to be constantly moving. So, so that never and do not lists. So those are lists that you kind of compile yourself as a guide for you when you're building the content, or as we're learning about the product and about the personas, we put together information. It's kind of like it comes up like as we do it. It's not something we sit down and we have like a brainstorm, or like we do a meeting where like everyone think about the opposite of what the customer is.
like maybe the client we're working with will tell us like, yeah, some people buy it like this, but then they return it. It's like, okay, anyone who's a return, which is, I think, an increasingly notable problem on Amazon is like increased returns. Just in general, some clients in some categories really suffer from high return rates, and anything you can do to cut down on return rates. We work with a lot of apparel businesses over the years, and apparel, soft goods has like always some of the highest returns. It's like the shirt was slightly too big, slightly too small. So, what can you put in the listing to make sure that you can do the best job possible, that the shopper is informed and they won't order a shirt that's way too big or way too small? Who's it not for? Like you can call that stuff out specifically, and then make sure to not talk to those people or to dissuade them if possible from trying to purchase.
Yeah. By the way, talk about returns. A couple of days ago, I read something that this high rate of return is the biggest problem, and it happens to be around 15%, 17%, something along those lines.
That's crazy high. Yeah, 15% is insane.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I see it's definitely above 10%. So it's definitely above 10%. So of course, it also depends on the price points and things like that. But it's a big problem, and Amazon's return policy is part of the problem. So
I agree.
Amazon apparently is changing their policy. Now they will charge people if they want to return. It's not a big amount. Apparently they'll charge $1 if you want to return. There's no more just free return thing. You have to pay for it.
Well, one last thing on that, Nick. I really do think that Amazon's, Prime membership and the behavior that they've encouraged with Prime, because look at someone's behavior and you can see the incentives that drove them to do that behavior. I'm a big believer in that kind of like way of looking at the world. And if you have Prime and you could just return stuff all day long and you could order stuff for free shipping all day long, well, it's going to encourage people to do that, right? Because they're like, wow, this is a great thing. And, I pay for Prime, so I should be able to do X, Y, and Z. They have an attitude about that too, which I think is what Amazon wanted, right? They want to engender that in customers and they successfully did. But what they did is they taught everybody that returns have no bad consequences and free shipping doesn't have any downside. And it does. It has economic consequences, it has human consequences, it has margin consequences. So these realities have been kind of, say, occluded by Amazon intentionally with Prime, but that's not how the world actually works. And now that we're going into this, we've touched on inflation a couple of times here, this belt tightening period with Amazon doing layoffs and everything, you can see that they're starting to dial down the ratchet on some of these things and do things that maybe, worked in the last 5-6 years, but no longer.
Yeah. So, okay. So now we've got the shopper, we've got the right kind of shopper. They saw the listing and said, okay, this looks like this is for me. I can see myself using this product. Now let's find out a little bit more. So they click on it and they're on the product detail page. Mm-hmm. So what a product detail page is an ocean. We can spend hours talking about it. So what I want to do with you is let's dissect the use of the bullets a little bit, Brent. So because bullets are, everybody says, oh, you need to have your main picture, you need to have your title, you need to have your bullets. So people talk about pictures, they talk about, of course, you have to have a full picture set, you need to have a video. I mean, we know all this, and there are different ways to go about it. Title, frankly, my philosophy is once people click on the listing and land on your product detail page, they're no longer looking at the title. So the title loses its importance, so to speak.
After the click, you're saying after the click, yeah.
After the click, right? Yeah, they are on the product detail page. They saw the title, and if it's mobile, they don't see the full title. So once they click on it, they land on the page. In fact, I sometimes look at it, I can't see the full title, and I click on it just to be able to read the full thing. And so I do those things. But ultimately, once they land on the product page, they want to know more about the product. The title at that point is not as important. Would you agree with that?
I would, with one caveat, which is for things that are specific, like sizes or weights or quantities, usually that's listed in the title. And I find myself as a shopper, and I know we think about this with optimizations, people might glance again at the title and say, oh, just to make sure it is 20 ounce, or this is a 15 pack, or these are 3 pairs of underwear. You'll get that information from the title if the title has that fully fleshed out. But of course, that's a simple blip of information. And once you've confirmed that it's the size or quantity or amount, then you move on to the other parts. So yeah, I largely agree with you.
Yeah. It's true. Which, by the way, makes an important point. You should put, in the case of parent-child relationships where you have variations on a listing, you need to put the variation info in the title. So, if it's a 12 pack, if it's a single item, or it's 8 ounce or 20 ounces or whatever, they need to be in the title of the individual child SKU.
Absolutely.
Because if you don't, the only option you have is those little either drop downs or tabs or whatever the case may be that Amazon has that may not always be 100%. And the next thing is you're going to end up with a return. So people are not going to know. Okay, so let's talk about the bullets because this I don't think that people discuss too much about the bullets. So you have character limit, right? You have share with us what kind of limits you have and what's the best way to utilize those bullets.
I'm actually not sure what the character limit for bullets are. I think it's 150 characters. That doesn't seem like enough. No, maybe it's 500. I actually don't know. Sorry, I'm not the best authority on that particular thing. I think it's
make it easy for you.
Yeah.
The total number of characters for the entire number of bullets you have is 1,000.
Oh, so it's roughly 200 each.
Yes. So you can have, what I usually do is, I haven't confirmed this with anybody, but it seems to work. I say, okay, you have 1,000 characters. That means 1,000 characters will be indexed. So you can have 200 characters of 5 bullets, or you can have 4 bullets with 250 each. So that's what, and sometimes
more. There's some listings where you can have 6 or 7, and if you add other data fields, there can be others that are added to that too. But I think 5 is the generally accepted standard, right? And I think the reason that 5 is good, though, Nick, is because you can also there's 5 different subdivisions, right? So like these are the 5 things I want to address in order of importance that someone might need to know to make an informed buying decision. I think that's the way to think about the bullets.
Yeah, I mean, it's true. So when I work on bullets, I don't want to say storyboard them, but what is the theme of each bullet? So I first create the theme. So that kind of creates it's like almost like writing a book. So I learned a long time ago, if you have a book idea, don't go writing it right away. First write the outline, because you'll get lost writing the book, and then very soon you'll give up. So write the outline. So just like that, bullets must have their theme. So first outline the themes of each bullet and what is it that you're going to address. And of course, having 5 is better than having 4, and then you go from there. So 200 versus 250, 4 bullets versus 5. So that's usually the norm. So, but how do you utilize it in the best possible way?
Yeah. Well, so let's take one step back first of all, because we talked about the Q&A earlier for the listings, right? And so our process roughly is like the information from Q&A, the information from reviews, both of which could be massaged and kind of collected with different tools. And then we want to look at competitors and see what they're doing with bullets too. Like what are the top things that they're mentioning? Typically we'll mimic those things and mock up the same kind of structure. And then we'll work in what we think is our unique angle or our unique advantage with our products. So, we can even address in some of the bullets like, hey, others have this kind of material. We have this material. Ours is better for that reason. We can explain the different use cases in the bullets. And this is in no particular order. We can demonstrate like, I don't know, some kind of like qualifications for like our manufacturing process or something like that. Or, I don't know, like where it's made potentially. I don't have too many specific examples, but those are some of the things that come to mind right away with bullets in particular.
Yeah. So I'll tell you what I usually do. So your point about utilizing the Q&A and the reviews and then looking at the competitions, I mean, that's such a great way to approach, because you are not only understanding what people want, you also know what people don't want. So you can emphasize those and then elevate yourself to a better place. So my approach is this. You have, let's say that you're utilizing all 5 bullets and then you're writing perfect copy. My assumption is, don't think that they're going to read all 5 bullets. People will read the first bullet. They'll start to read the second bullet, and they'll take a quick look at the third bullet, and they're pretty much done at that point. So that's my thinking. So the fourth and the fifth really will not get as much attention as the first and the second.
I agree.
Number one.
That's why I said we start in order. The priority has to be in order.
Yeah, exactly. So the other essential part of building your bullets is they are not there to provide facts and figures. They are there to make an emotional connection with the shopper. So therefore, you need to have the bullets presented in a way that will get the shopper to say, that's me. So what will do that? Giving facts and figures will not do that. But speaking to who they are will do that. Speaking to who they are, it kind of goes back to your customer avatar. What is it that these people identify with? For example,
and using their language too, this concept of understanding what resonates with this type of individual, what works on listings that are big sellers, and using the language. So without even really consciously realizing it, they're slipping into a mode where they're like, I understand the way this is phrased, the words they're using. A good example might be something that's really specific. Maybe something that's listed in like industrial and scientific on Amazon's subcategories. It's like, I don't know, some obscure engine motor that goes for some industrial thing. You can find anything on Amazon these days. Someone comes to that listing and maybe you're using acronyms from their field. You're using like technical terms that they would know that most people wouldn't be familiar with. That is going to be what's going to resonate with them. So this is the speaking to them aspect of it.
Yeah, exactly. So following on that premise, what I always say is, your first bullet needs to address the audience you are targeting, because they read the title on the search results page, they looked at the product, and for whatever reason, they said, okay, this is for me. So now with the bullets on that first one, you say, join the professionals or join the other woodworkers and carpenters and blah blah blah. So now suddenly, if you are in that audience, well, you're gonna say, this is for me. You don't even read the rest so much, right? So immediately now, and also there is a great, I'm sure there's a guy who does the Helium 10 workshops. Peter, I think his name is. Something King, I think. So one day he did a little workshop, and he said that the entire world population connect with each other based on 8 core feelings. So for anybody who's listening, I would encourage, look it up, find and or just reach out. I'm happy to provide. And then he listed these 8 core feelings. For example, food and drink. People connect over food and drink.
Sure.
People like social acknowledgement. So he just goes through like safety. People care about their safety. So
that's probably a big one for like baby category, for example. Like you want to know that this product is 100% safe and nothing toxic and not no choking hazard, that kind of stuff.
Exactly. Yeah. So if you word and then you make your bullets in a way that is call to action, that addresses those core feelings that will get people to connect with you. That's really the way I found that bullets would be most beneficial. And then make sure that you put them in that exact same order, and don't think that they're going to go all the way to bullet 4 and bullet 5. So what do you think about that?
I think that's really wise to understand that the high value must be at the top, and then the ones that are still nice to have. And don't forget, we're talking again about art and science. What else are bullets? They're a great opportunity to index for further keywords. So maybe someone won't necessarily read bullet 4 and 5, or they won't, just skim it. But you might be able to fit a ton of super relevant keywords still in there. And not even keywords, but key phrases too, that maybe some of which will stand out to that person because yet again, it resonates with them. It highlights in their brain when they see it. So they're also an opportunity for that indexing. I like the idea a lot. I think there's a couple ways to slice this cake. And that's a fine way to do it. And, to go back to another thing is that on mobile, I believe it's still like this, but the bullets are much further down the scroll. So you have the title and like product images, which I think are maybe the most important on mobile. But eventually you do come to the bullets, further down the scroll than you're used to on desktop. Doesn't mean they're any less important, and I'm sure people still read them, but it's just that they're oriented and let's say ordered differently in that situation.
Yeah, exactly. So, okay. I think, this is very valuable information. I especially like your approach about always thinking about connecting art and science pieces together, because you need to back up whatever your thoughts are with data. And frankly, there's another thing here. I think, just as you mentioned, it kind of hit me. There is a reason why Amazon does things the way they do it, because it's always backed by data. And in fact, I had one of the Amazon guys on the show. He said that, why do you think we require white background? He says, because the data shows they convert better. So I say, why do you think bullets are pushed way down in mobile? Because people don't really pay so much attention to them. So
at least on a small screen, they don't. Yeah, well, they're probably much more visual, flipping through things and making those split-second decisions based on a half second of looking at an image.
Yeah. So Brent, tell us. Earlier you mentioned that the biggest opportunity on Amazon in 2023. What do you think that is?
Yeah, sure. So I think this is a bit like technical, but I think that we've gone through several seasons or evolutions in the Amazon, let's call it FBA space. I've been doing advertising in Amazon since 2015, and then the last couple of years moving more and more into this conversion rate optimization and listings and everything. But I've seen a lot of like seasons come and go, and I think that the opportunity on Amazon used to be, get a product up, figure out some, rough sourcing costs, get logistics in place, and game the algorithm, figure out how to rank, or a couple of years ago, I think it was have a super premium listing with A+ content and really good photos and, things like bullet points like we just talked about. I think a lot of those things are quickly becoming table stakes, and any company that is really serious about Amazon, either it's a, Amazon native brand, or a company like, Procter & Gamble that's coming to Amazon and engaging with an agency or hiring in-house to make their listings amazing, is all that kind of water is finding its level. Like everybody is at that same level. And so what's going to happen, I think, on Amazon increasingly is brands are going to win or lose or live or die based on what I would call more traditional commerce, which is like, how can you make your packaging as light and as small as possible so you can fit more units in a container, so you can fit more units on a pallet? How can you cut down your shipping costs by 5 cents per unit? How can you get your import costs lower because there's materials that are cheaper in one country than another? So a lot of e-commerce actually is really this unsexy stuff, because what we've talked about so far is what I call like a lot of the sexy stuff, like optimize your listing, do really good ad campaigns with relevant keywords. Like that's like the fun stuff that I like. A lot of people who are really quite good at Amazon have mastered over the years, but that's a different skill set than operations. Let's call it e-commerce operations. Like I just gave some examples about packaging and sourcing, right? We're done with like the Wild West days of Amazon, where you could just like list anything and just like, put a bunch of traffic to it. And I think that I heard this stated once. I know you like these quotes like this, Nick. This is something you're into. But offense wins games, defense wins championships. I think it's from Green Bay Packers, the American football team. But basically, what I'm talking about here is defense, right? What we've talked about so far is offense, but defense, I think, is where you might win the championship being a long-term, sustainable, successful business. A good example I heard on a podcast recently was a brand owner who had a product packaging that was really well suited for Amazon, right? So you would see it on the product listing, you would see the product, it had all the information you could need, and you would go and buy it, and you'd get it in a package at your house, as you do, and you would open it and say, this is exactly what I needed. It's like some kind of toy for dogs or like dog health supplement. But when you took that package and you put it on a retail shelf at a small retailer, like in the physical world, not on Amazon, where there was no product photos, there was no video, there was no A+ content, there was no bullet points, you looked at the product and you said, I'm not even sure what this is, much less I want to buy it. I don't even know actually what this is, because if something's in a poly bag or a nondescript cardboard box with only a couple markings on the outside of it, that doesn't really instill confidence. Like if you saw that in the store, like at Walmart and walking around in the US, you like saw that, you're like, what is this? I don't even know what this is. Why would I buy this? But you have to think about, what do big brands do with packaging? The package is the only place they have to sell it to you. There's no other place. They don't have any videos. They don't have any bullet points like we just talked about. So how can you mimic what some of those bigger brands are doing and make sure that your packaging itself is selling the product? It's not just, oh, it's a box that it comes in when someone opens it, big deal. Because that's how you're eventually going to get out of e-commerce and get off of Amazon and move into small retailers and wholesale situations, and maybe even one day, situation like arrangements with like a Target or a Walmart or some of these like massive companies that maybe the margin's lower, but the scale is unbelievable, unbelievable scale. So that's the direction I think that opportunity exists in Amazon, is treating it more and more like a traditional commerce operation, actually, because for so long we've been able to use our nerd skills and sell. But as everyone else has done that now, the playing field starts to level and you have to worry about these unsexy defense things. So I think that's a bit of a nuanced answer. I'm not sure if it's the most fun, but that's my personal belief from what I've seen.
Well, I definitely have thoughts about it. You're basically suggesting that D2C model will, in the long run, turn into B2B model for these brands that are creating their products, because you're suggesting that they cater for the online experience of their products, neglecting what big brands have already successfully done
for hundreds of years.
And therefore that is really where things are going to go. And if that's the case, then there is no direct to consumer, it's B2B. It's where you have these big boys. So I am a little bit conflicted about this. Primarily, my struggle with this whole idea is because Amazon has been pursuing this philosophy to flatten the supply chain for years. And in order to achieve that, they pursued growth strategy without really thinking about making money. So they signed these deals with vendors so that they could sell it directly to consumer. And then finally, 3-4 years ago, they purged a bunch of those vendors, and now it's handful, and now it's become profit strategy. So in other words, the whole strategy of we're not going to have supply chain, we're going to have brands sell directly to consumers, which is going to bring the price down, which is going to increase the quality, because if brands sell directly, they're going to have vested interest in the success of the product rather than just push it through their supply chain. So that's what Amazon has been pursuing, and it is succeeding because a lot of these. So while this is happening, retail industry is changing. Nobody really knows what the future of retail is going to look like. So that's why I'm a little bit conflicted about this model where the brands will embrace the supply chain approach in order to achieve scale. That's where my conflict is. But definitely, you never know. You never know, right?
It's a hypothesis to put out there. And I want to stress maybe the most important part of what I want to communicate, which is that understanding your cost structure and getting that as tight as possible and saving 5 cents here, 3 cents there, that stuff in e-commerce, even D2C, like we're talking about, adds up very quickly. So if you're selling the same product as someone else, but you're able to have it in better packaging with better sourcing costs and better terms from your 3P and better shipping from FedEx because you have a deal, then that $29 that they get in revenue per product goes a lot less far than your $29. Therefore, your margins are better. Therefore, you can do more other stuff, better marketing, other channels, hire more people. And that is going to be like the incremental advantage you might get over them. There's this idea in,
I totally agree. I'll put it to you this way. In business world, whether this is e-commerce or not, it applies no matter what you're selling, even if you're selling lemonade or you're selling high value, some intellectual stuff. Business is war, and the war is made up of battles that are being fought. And in business world, battles are always fought in the margins. It's always in the margins. So that means if you can find 5 cents here, 3 cents there, and 2 cents there, and by the time you do that, it all adds up, and you have to fight each battle one by one in order to win the war. So there is no question about that. So this is going to become, as something becomes mainstream, this idea becomes even more important, because when something becomes mainstream, guess what's happening? The distribution is scaling. So when you scale your distribution, we can talk all day long with examples about this. This is so right. So I totally agree. But we're not gonna go into it. I think we covered great. So I want to get to know you. So tell us. I always like to dig deep. So tell us where you grew up, and then give us your early life experiences, which brought you here.
Early life experiences, interesting. Yeah, I'm originally, I do live in France now for going on 7 years, but I'm originally from Pennsylvania, so a U.S. state on near the East Coast. I grew up in the Lehigh Valley region, Allentown, if anyone listening is from that area, and I have a very neutral East Coast accent as a result of that. Formative experiences, I worked for many years in IT and like tech support, so I do have a degree in basically computer troubleshooting, I guess you could call it, network troubleshooting, network security, that kind of stuff. Did that for some number of years. Then I eventually ended up at a B2B marketing company doing Google ads, was there for several years. That's where I picked up a lot of my advertising knowledge and background. And that was mostly, search advertising with some display. So very similar conceptually to a lot of what happens on Amazon with advertising console and the different keyword-based search types. There's display advertising, which is much more like Facebook and some parts of Google, and then you have the search-based, which is also Google, but largely Amazon is keyword-based, target-based. And so rolling into Amazon in 2015, which I got into totally by accident, like you mentioned, I think at the top of the show, I was in a very different industry. At the time, I was actually working on yachts. I got pretty disillusioned with a lot of the tech stuff I worked in, and I decided to have a change of career after a pretty rough patch at a company that I had a bad time with. And I got into yachting. So I was literally scrubbing boats, working on the deck of mega yachts and hanging out with other yachties and stuff. I was living in Florida at the time. And I had an acquaintance who was selling on Amazon, and he said, "Hey, there's ads on Amazon." And he's like, "Didn't you used to do digital advertising?" I was like, "Yeah, I know a couple of things about that." And he said, "Why don't you help me with these ads?" And so this was 2015, keep in mind. And the CPC on Amazon ads at that time was incredibly low. Because I looked this up, later on, but sponsored ads had only come out in late 2014. So 2015 summer was less than a year in. And it was very, very, very basic. There was no match types. I think auto campaigns were the main thing, but you could set up broad match keyword campaigns. So I think I did that. And we started seeing some incredible returns like right away with these campaigns because the CPCs were like 3 or 4 cents, and the products that he was selling were $89. So we'd get like, a couple clicks and a conversion, couple clicks and a conversion. So the ACOS was like, infinitely good. It's like, oh, okay, this is an interesting model, because basically what you're doing, I understood immediately, is like you're buying real estate on this marketplace. This is a captive audience. I knew what Prime was, of course, at the time. I didn't have it, but this is how this works. Okay. And started to familiarize myself more with the Amazon ecosystem, and then dropped what I was doing with the yachting industry, got out of there. And because I saw there was opportunity to take on like a lot of clients and teach people about this, and, have a nice book of clients and enjoy working for myself again, which I had done in the past too. Which I really enjoyed. It's just that sometimes it doesn't work out. You have to try a couple times.
So growing up though, because you are an entrepreneur, which makes you a risk taker, which makes you somewhat of an idealist, a visionary, and frankly, an opportunity chasing person. So this thing does not fall on your head at the age of 30. You become that person. And but you don't know you are that person when you are a kid, right? So it kind of starts to show signs of it. So when was it? That's what I'm interested to find out. So when was it that you realized you liked wheeling and dealing and independent thinking kind of stuff?
That was probably at some point in middle school, which in the US is like, in your early teens. Because I was never really someone who took very well to like structured schooling, let's say. Like I never really got along super well with the idea of grades and sitting in a classroom all day. And, I when I went to school, Nick, I went to hang out with my friends. I was very social. I didn't go to school to learn anything. I went there to sit and hang out with my friends in between classes and go to lunch and, goof off after school and that kind of stuff. And at that time, I had already been doing, messing around with computers since I was like, before even a teenager. So I had a business where I would fix people's computers, build computers for them, clean spyware off of there, and, help them recover files, all that kind of stuff. I did that all through late middle school through high school and even into university.
And did you make money doing that?
Yeah, I made money doing that. And then I actually worked at the IT department at my high school. And then I worked at the IT department at my university, which is like ended up being my career there for a couple of years. But that kind of, at that point, I only saw that as like a fun thing to do. I enjoyed it. I liked, some aspects of having my own small little enterprise, but it wasn't enough money that I was like buying cars and buying newest Xbox or anything like that. It was just like self-directed fun. And I enjoyed the connection aspect of it, which has been a through line for me most of my life, is like the social and connection aspect of entrepreneurship. Like I really love being a community, being part of a community, building a community, connecting with other people, going to events and shows and talking to them about what's working, what's not working, and just getting that like feel for on the ground and building those relationships. So I like that aspect of it a lot.
So and then when you did that, making money, fixing your friends' computers and so on and so forth, how did your parents take that? Because that it's different to go play and hang out, but it's another thing to actually do stuff and make money. And how did they take that?
Yeah, they encouraged it. They encouraged it for sure. I mean, my dad, and actually maybe this is another important thing to mention, but both my uncles on my mom's side and my father all own their own businesses. So entrepreneurship is kind of like something that's a part of the family and something I grew up around. So when I'd see my uncle who owns a roofing business with his team and like hanging out with them and taking them out to awesome dinners or going to like a football game with the team and like just, treating them super well. And then like they'd have a good year and he'd give out bonuses. I was like, that seems like a pretty cool thing to do, is like run a small business and to have people. Now, I don't have any skill in roofing. And my other uncle is actually a brewer, makes beer. Shout out East End Brewing in Pittsburgh. Yeah, and he has a similar situation with his team. And like, they have a small restaurant now. And my dad actually does digital marketing as well. And he's been doing, consulting work there for many years after he got into that in the late 90s, actually, when he worked at a magazine. So there's definitely a, let's call it self-employed entrepreneurial streak that's kind of in the family. So I grew up around that stuff. So it wasn't a big jump for me, I guess, to be like, oh, well, I could do that too. I just thought, well, I'll just start doing this and earn some money. It seemed better than working at the local restaurant as a busboy, which I did for one summer. But Yeah, restaurant work wasn't for me. I'm much happier in front of a computer. Cleaning things, fixing things, networking, setting up people's Wi-Fi networks. And Wi-Fi back then was a pretty like dark art, scary technology. People didn't know what was going on. So,
you know what I'm hearing? So first of all, you like gadgets and computers and playing with them. So school was just a way for you to really find people to play with around those tools, so to speak, and also having that environment that you grew up in, where running a business, owning a business, having a team of people around you. That's a lifestyle for you. That's the natural fit. So it looks like internet made the perfect opportunity for you to run a business, because I heard a few times during the recording that you mentioned, I don't really quite know that, but my team, you refer to your team. So the way I see it is you still are playing, except you play in the internet field, and then you enjoy.
It's a big sandbox. I love the idea, man. Yeah, that's a fun idea. And like, I'm not sure if it's one of our 5 core values explicitly, but like, have fun is definitely something that I believe in. And, I think it's sometimes we risk being like far too serious about many things in life. And like a lot of business to me is also a game. And I don't mean that to say like it's like not meaningful, but it's quite meaningful. It's the opposite. It's just that it needs to be seen as a game. And there's a certain element of play that goes into it. And, play doesn't have to mean, playing with like Play-Doh. Play can mean like, I'm going to play with this idea or this business model, or we're going to try this. And like, let's see how people respond to that. If we communicate it this way, how will people respond? What does the market think of this? This is the kind of level of thinking I'm at right now, because I'm very into like the growth and the marketing aspect of the company. I don't do very much in the way of delivery anymore. Of course, that's why I have the great people like Elena I mentioned on my team, and all the other people that do listing optimization and the ad stuff. So I leave that up to them. That's really their purview. And I, of course, learn a lot from them. I learn a tremendous amount from them. I ask them stuff all the time. And that's one of my biggest sources of knowledge, because they're the ones that have the boots on the ground, so to speak. But I think play is an interesting through line. Yeah. And also the comfort of just saying like, I can be responsible for the livelihood of this many people, and I feel comfortable leading them into doing what I think is the right move. And you know what? Being humble enough to admit when it's not the right move, and say, actually, I made a mistake here, and here's why. But what I've found over the years is that explaining the reason I think something or the way that I arrive at a conclusion is actually way more valuable than just telling people what to think or what to do. Because if they start to understand what my thought process is for how I got to this like conclusion, which is why I think we should do this, then they can do 2 things. They can learn from that thought process and do that themselves, or they can pick it apart and analyze it and say, I like steps 1 through 3, but step 4, which got you to step 5, I don't agree with step 4. And here's why I don't agree with it. Because in my experience, this is actually how it looks, with this particular, client, or with this particular like service we should offer. So there is definitely a healthy culture of like debate at Pathfinder, where people are encouraged to speak up. Yeah. So if you don't speak up, it's actually abnormal. So if someone's too quiet, we're like, why doesn't that person like give us more critique or feedback? It's kind of something that we expect of people.
Yeah. Great.
Yeah.
Well, I tell you what, to me, it sounds like you created the perfect playground for yourself. Then you're having fun, and the whole team is having fun and making money at the same time. So that's great. So Brent, tell us, how can people reach you and share your contact information with us?
Yeah, sure. Actually, my contact information is super simple. So if you go to brent.bike, I actually have the domain .bike, like, bicycle, BIKE in English, .bike. If you go to www.brent.bike, that has all my information. You can book a call with me there. If you want to do a paid consult, you can just get in touch with Pathfinder as a company. If you want to like work with us or talk to us, we give free advertising audits for qualified, clients of a certain size. And I think that you mentioned also, Nick, is there an offer for your audience specifically? Because I have something in mind.
Like to make one, yeah. This would be the right time.
Yeah. So usually we charge a couple $100 for like an exhaustive listing audit. But as part of this, I decided that we can do a 2 listing audit for free. And this is an exhaustive listing audit. So like, here, look at these 2 listings. Do you think you could improve these? If so, what would you do? Here, look at these 2 ASINs. We'd be very interested to hear from people. I have Elena and her whole team like on standby. So if we get some interest, people that want an exhaustive audit from us, that, like I said, otherwise, we charge, I think, $350 or $400 for like a, 2 listing audit or something like that. So totally free of charge. We're willing to, just give those away to the audience because we want to hear from who's out there and see what they have to say. If you agreed or liked what I said, then it resonates with you. It's just like we talked about. Maybe we could work together. Or maybe we could at least give you some advice on what we think about what you have up on Amazon, because that infinite shelf is not getting any less crowded, unfortunately.
Exactly. Well, thank you. And so everybody, you heard Brent. So reach out to him and just mention Amazon Legends, and then you can have your 2 ASINs audited. This was great. Thank you, Brent. Thank you for being here.
No problem, Nick. Thank you so much for hosting and inviting me on. I really appreciate it.
It was a pleasure. And this brings us to the end of another episode, and I'll see you on the next one.
If you enjoyed today's episode, be sure to subscribe, rate, and review the episode, and share it with someone you think would benefit from it too.